distinguished chair, distinguished Anatoly Ivanovich, dear participants. Today, at the conference, we've heard repeatedly the idea that as a result of various processes in Europe, we have the deterioration of contradictions and the vulnerability of all countries in the face of new challenges and threats has increased. I agree with all the conclusions made by the Defense Minister of Belarus and Professor Rar. We need to point out that the foundation of the European security system, those provisions were put forward by the Soviet Union during World War II. The very foundation of the idea was based or was proclaimed the responsibility of that great power for the destinies of the world. That's precisely the point that was made by President Putin at the 70th session of the General Assembly of the UN. He reminded all leaders of the responsibility of their states for their steps. And for about 40 years, most of the European countries in their relations are being guided by the 10 principles that were declared in August of 1975 in Helsinki by the top leaders of 35 leaders in the final act of the conference. Unfortunately, the positive and general role of the common European home that helped to overcome some uncertainties in Europe, but it was never implemented fully. So the subsequent events of 20th century and early 21st century shows us that the existing security system is in crisis because of multiple reasons. Today, the main problems, as we see them, are double standards in the resolution of various conflicts and the inability of unions and individual states to control and check implications resulting from the U.S. unilateral actions. And I think we need to enhance the role of the UN as the only international organization that's capable of coping with the conflicts of that scale. I need to point out that the situation in security, both on the European and Asian continents, make the priorities for the Russian Federation. So the conflict in the Middle East actually sharpened the terrorist problem in Europe, and NATO eastward expansion and terrorist activities along our borders really made the security problems even more acute. Well, I can think of the deployment of elements of the anti-ballistic missile system and the establishment of task forces of NATO close to Russian borders. The slowdown on Nazism, downplaying Nazism in the Baltic countries, those facts do not improve international relations. There is also multiple attempts to rewrite history. And rhetoric of some European political leaders towards Russia is already named Cold War II, and it's not the best description. It is inappropriate to speak of the European security separately from that of Russia. We are not on different poles. Geographically, we are located on the same continent in terms of economics. We are in the same boat, and ideological barriers were removed long time back, but still we face some common threats and challenges. And that enable us to say that joint efforts, it's only joint efforts on the part of all our states that will help us to establish a new European security system architecture. Although the establishment of such a system will require the involvement of all world powers, including the United States and China. Today, it's clear for many people that the notion of the European security is getting more and more integrated, and the anti-terrorist activities is getting more and more important, and the economic and energy security, as well as food security, environmental and demographic security matters are becoming more and more important. From our perspective, under the circumstances, Russia's cooperation with any European states on the European security matters is to be carried out both in bi- and multilateral formats. That's the reason why it's only the concept of the security based on a constructive and mutual respect cooperation that can counter and counterweight the approach based on the unilateral advantages. An effective legal system is to be formed in Europe, laying grounds for the cooperation of states in order to counter drug trafficking, terrorism, Nazism, cybercrimes, and it is to ensure biosecurity and collective responses to extreme situations and natural and technogenic disasters. Environmental protection and challenges should also be tackled by the system. To my regret, spiritual and moral values are being erased in Europe, the ones that Europe was proud of even yesterday. It's not only about human rights and freedoms, but it's the value of human life. I think the main reason is that the views on security differ a lot. So the arrangements that are coming into shape today, such as the European policy of security and defense, is to be used for more cohesion for the countries that participate in those alliances. And for that, we need to achieve a greater level of security in general. We are faced now with some type of new threats. For the first time in history, Europe is not a center of international relations in global terms. The termination of the systemic standoff between East and West and the emergence of other countries into the political arena, the shift of the gravity force in economy, they can really make a European continent a safe haven. As a characteristic of the state of the Atlantic security system, I can say that it's not fully in line with the requirements. Evolution of the strategic priorities of Russia can also serve for the purposes of firm European security. Being most important players in international security arena, we need to pay more attention to the prospects and forms of our cooperation. But if we manage to rearrange most of the responsibilities recorded in the Charter of and the Helsinki Act, if we try to convert them from a legal to juridical dimension, and I think that those principles stated in the Helsinki Accords that were referred to earlier are similarly relevant today too. You don't have to invent a will. You need to stick to the existing provisions guided by same sets of values. We believe that some new comprehensive treaties or agreements could be drafted when all countries and states are invited to participate, as well as leading international organizations. However, it takes a lot of time, and it's a painful process to draft such a treaty. So perhaps states can find it better to comply with already existing agreements and treaties involving more and more countries as stakeholders, since we need the results today. Tomorrow can be late. Thank you for your attention.